What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to Stacks by the Numbers, and it's Friday. I know we just closed a few minutes ago, but I just wanted to do a little update video here on a company that I know a lot of people were watching. We're looking at Plug Power Inc., ticker symbol PLUG here on the NASDAQ. I'm sure a lot of people probably made YouTube videos today. Oh, here's what happened with Plug Power and all this stuff. But obviously, at the end of the day, we looked at this very early in the year. It was back in around March. And right here when I made the video, I kind of mentioned that we could drop down here to the bottom trend line, and then if you wanted, you can potentially position yourself before earnings. And it turns out they actually beat on the revenue side there with a big miss on the EPS side. So initially you can see we dropped down to about 7.5 and then went back on a nice rally, almost getting back to the mid-teens. We got back to about 13.5. I think I was looking for a fib of maybe like 14, like 70 or something. I don't remember. But I was expecting, a good possible beat from them. And if those numbers did come in, you would potentially see a rally like that. But it's that big miss on the EPS side. That's what made it drop down first before rallying up. And then it was able to immediately start selling off because of those light EPS numbers. And then we can see the next quarter here in August, basically the same thing happened. The company came in, revenue chunked up here, 260 plus million above analyst expectations of 237 million. So an excellent beat there on the revenue side, but then coming in over 50% lighter on the profitability side. And then I believe I saw potentially a descending triangle or a wedge, and I remember saying that if this quarter is a beat on the top and bottom line, you could potentially have a pop out back higher. And then I said if that doesn't happen, then again you're probably going to have to wait for the next quarter to come in. And as you see, the stock began to actually break down here. This is when markets really were chunking down here, September and October, and you can see basically going to around Halloween, the stock drops all the way down into the fives. And this is kind of what I was talking about when I mentioned that the stock was overvalued, because I mentioned that if the company, I know I spoke, I think specifically about the revenue, but I mentioned if the company comes in, seriously light on one of these earnings estimate numbers, then they could potentially chunk the stock down to like $6 or $5. And it looks like, as well as you see, that's basically exactly what happened. They brought the stock down basically to the mid fives here. I'm seeing 558. And then kind of bounced it back up here to the fib level of almost 7. And this is actually when the markets were climbing. And as you see, Plug was just kind of dropping down. So they basically felt it was weak, and they weren't very optimistic on this stock going into these earnings. And now the earnings come out, and as you see, it's basically kind of disappointing across the board. We can see that losses have widened. And then, of course, the company comes in, misses on the revenue side by about 9.5%. So, again, this is what I was talking about when I mentioned the inconsistencies of the company, right? Because they'll come out with a quarter like this, and it's like a phenomenal overall business quarter with the revenue growing significantly, and they come in, 9, 10% above expectations on the revenue side. And, you're sitting there like, holy cow, this company, they might be losing money, but, they're definitely growing, people want their product. And then you switch over here to the next quarter, and then it's like, oh, now they missed by 9, 10%. It's like, what the heck is going on? So that's why, in my opinion, I don't know if I can necessarily blame the estimates for earnings. I do think it has to unfortunately fall more on the company shoulders. But right now, as we see, again, markets just closed, but the stock's down to 3.5, taking a massive hit today. And when negatives come out, man, they will immediately take these overinflated stocks, especially these tech stocks, or like a biotech. They will immediately bring them back down to earth. And this is what you're seeing here. Again, 40% drop. In my opinion, I think it keeps going and drops down into the 2s from this level. And even here at the close at a little over 3.5, you can see market cap 2.13 billion. And again, the EPS we looked last time was dismal, consistent misses, and now you see for the last couple of quarters as well since we last looked, big misses and trending downward. The company, of course, basically saying it could potentially go insolvent and not be able to keep its doors open. And of course, this is one of the negatives when I mentioned when you have a company that is growing its business, but also at the same time, it's costing them $1.50, $2 to make that dollar. It's just a recipe for disaster. The good news is that, again, apparently people do like their product, and they're getting more and more orders and more and they're increasing the list of their clientele. So that's why you can't completely count the company out and bash them. The problem is the whole operation just seems like it's not very efficient. So chances are what's going to happen is they're probably going to continue to beat the crap out of the stock, and either A, they're going to be able to turn it around themselves and start making the whole process more efficient and begin to narrow these losses on their end, or B, even with revenue consistently climbing, the stock will continue to probably sell off and keep bleeding. However, they will potentially probably get a buyout bid, if you think about it. So that's why one of two things are going to happen. Either the stock's going to, kind of just get beaten up over time until they really start to bring in even more revenue and are able to turn it around and narrow those losses and lean more towards profitability. Then, of course, everyone's going to start piling back into the stock. Or on the flip side, again, they will eventually kind of plateau, however, still having some value in their IPs and anything else they may have on the back burner. And that's when, a larger company, I don't know if it'll be a Tesla, but obviously basically any other tech company that's in better shape could potentially step in and potentially acquire Plug Power. So obviously that's, we're talking further down the road, but I drew out just kind of like a potential projection that I'm seeing here because the revenue has grown over time from these like lows here back in 2020. But as you can tell, right after the pandemic, I feel like they almost tried to bring a lot of these stocks down to their quote unquote like fair value when the markets had that serious pullback and everything was locked down here in March of 2020. And as you can see, they brought it down to 253. And that's why right now the stock's at 354, but obviously immediately dropped down to 322. But I'm sure there were a couple of bottom feeders who stepped in and, volume started to come in, and that's why the stock ended up bouncing around and getting kind of back to that mid-range here on the daily candle. But I have a feeling that it's going to slowly drop down. Again, these are just projected trend lines, obviously nothing set in stone, but I just have a feeling that, even if it doesn't wedge, that they'll probably bring it down like in this downward channel, and they could potentially bring it all the way back down to 2.5, which again would be about a 33% drop. But right here, as of last year, 700 million, now at 2.1 billion, they're trading 3 times annual revenue, right? But again, as we see, random Steam friend, but again, as we see here, we can see multiple downgrades coming in here from Oppenheimer to perform from outperform, right? So now it's not going to do better than the market. It's going to do kind of in line with the market. And a lot of people lowered their price targets as well. Lowering this from a buy to a hold, price target is 6. That's what I mean. They still see value and they see the increases in revenue. So that's why I'm saying it's not like I really don't think the company is completely done, even though they may have like hinted towards that, and that's why the stock is taking a massive smack up today. But overall, I think that I think that there is still value here. And that's why it could completely fly underneath the radar and drop down into like the 2s and just kind of like stay there for like a year and a half. But as the company is slowly increasing its revenue, and that's what I mean, hopefully able to narrow those losses, then it's going to slowly start climbing up. And that's what I mean. No one's really going to talk about it until it gets like back up here in this range. And then all of a sudden it's like, yo, remember Plug? Remember they beat it up down to, and it was at like 238. Now it's back up to like $7, and they're saying, inside of like the next 9 to 12 months, they may start seeing profitability or something. You know what I'm saying? Then all of a sudden the whole story is going to turn around, and then everyone's going to be like, oh, you know what? This is a $12 stock. This is a $15 stock. So it's going to take a lot of time, but the point is that they still see value here. And that's why even if the stock gets beaten up down, let's just say to this 2.5 level, for all again, someone may step in and say, oh, we'll offer you, $4.10 a share, or 5.20 a share or something like that. And again, it may be a big drop. It may be a big hit to the overall long-term value of the stock. But again, what you have to understand is, just like we saw with U.S. Steel, now all of a sudden when a bid comes in, right, a stock is worth supposedly what another person's willing to pay for it. So even right now at 3.5, if, Microsoft called them up and said, oh, we'll give you $5 a share, the stock's immediately going to go to $5 a share. That's what I mean. That's what it's worth. And then with a situation like that, the whole story is immediately changed, because now investors and big boys on Wall Street know that we have value again. And of course, more importantly, once a bid comes in, there is always potential for a second bid and a third bid, which again is what we saw with U.S. Steel recently, a couple months back. One bid finally came in, stock got beat up, then all of a sudden another bid came in, and that's what I mean. Now you have multiple larger companies eyeing this other company, but also now that cements and confirms that there is value there, so we can't completely beat the stock up much lower than that level, because that's what everyone's saying it's at least worth. You understand what I'm saying? But anyway, going off on a massive tangent there. But Plug Power, from overweight down to neutral, just price target. Sometimes we're just off by 40%. This is my favorite one. This is obviously Northland Capital. Downgrades Plug, cuts price target to 7 from 18. Sometimes you're just off by double digits. And obviously that doesn't add to the situation, because there's always those crazy analysts that have, these massive over-inflated valuations of these companies, right? And they probably were pretty stubborn and didn't really want to lower that price target, right? And now news like this comes out and it's like, oh crap, we were way off. Okay, we're going to have to lower this to single digits, drop this price down by, 60-70%. So, this is basically what's going on with Plug, and this is why, again, the spending $1.50, $1.80, $2 to make $1 is always a recipe for disaster. And of course, you see more red in the immediate short term as opposed to the long term. So right now, what I would do is, unfortunately, still I would kind of wait and see, especially now with this new news coming to light. But yeah, they brought it. Is that on the daily? Yeah, even on the 1 day, here you can see towards the close, they brought it back above the moving average, which is nice. But again, if it's going to be now in this downward channel off of this bad news, then it's probably going to go back to a low like that of, 2.5. And this is unfortunate. Again, it's a little bit of a salty victory, because I know a lot of you were involved and now you're down even more. And, we wanted to see some good things, but this is why I always say, like, these small cap tech stocks that got exploded after stimulus money came into it, that's why, like, even something like Airbnb that could, like, still look good long term, but in the short term, in my opinion, I still think it's way too overvalued. Stocks like Spotify, Shopify, right? That's what I mean. If for any reason these heavily overinflated stocks come out with any negative news, you see what can happen to the value of the stock. And that's why I'd rather miss a rally and pace myself and buy it at a fair value, instead of just chasing it towards its highs, just hoping that it's going to continue to climb and break out. Now looking at the daily, we can see we completely broke down out of the Bollinger Bands, and MACD obviously crossed to the downside here on the daily. RSI sitting at about 23 1/3. Definitely can't be an indicator, because not only have we hit that mark before, but now the company's potentially saying that it can't keep its doors open. So obviously that's really not much could be used as an indicator right now. That's what I mean. This is now completely shifted more towards the fundamental metrics as opposed to the technical patterns. And and then that's what I mean. The numbers just aren't there to back it up, and that's why I just feel like a situation like this, everyone in more than half of people who read this story jumped in and either shorted the stock or bought puts, right? There weren't a lot of buyers today, probably. We don't even have to look. It's probably common sense. But at the end of the day, again, in my opinion, they're going to beat it up. They're going to completely bring it back down to reality. And this is what happens when we pump stocks up, right? It was on the up and up. They were getting some good news, probably overvalued at this point because revenue, again, look, was coming in 50, 90 million, nice jumps. But now we're up to, 200, 300 million. So obviously, if it was able to be overvalued, it would have been here recently, not all the way back here. It wasn't justified, and that's what happened. We took a $3-4 stock that was already overvalued, and we took it to $78, and that's what I mean. It should have stayed at $3-4, and as you see now, after 3 years of time, now all of a sudden it's right back where it started, and that's, I've mentioned this on other videos as well. That's what I mean. It's like if you got in all the way back there and you had a big run, but you didn't sell because you were holding on for more for the long term, and now you've been holding for 2.5, 3 years, and now you turn around and it's at the same price. Well, then again, guess what? Not to beat you up, but you just locked up all that money for the last 3 years to do absolutely nothing. Now to realize that you are in a potential piece of crap, and now you may have to liquidate after all these years and have nothing to show for it. So that's why, follow the numbers, follow the consistency. But here on the weekly, we're probably going to continue to slide. Again, we're below the bottom Bollinger Band here. RSI is sub 30 here on the weekly. It's definitely going to get ugly. And again, this is why, I know some people will dislike the videos if I look at, one of these trending stocks and you're in. And I think that, in my opinion, it's going to go down. I know I may get like a couple of dislikes on the video. Just people, we could say just hating or being salty. But, at the end of the day, I understand because, again, like I always say, we work hard for our money. We're emotionally tied to it. So, someone says something opposite of what you're expecting. You're like, screw this guy, whatever, downvote. So, I can understand where that reaction comes from. But also, at the end of the day, I will always say, whether you agree with me or not, this is just my opinion, but I've always been, more grounded and more realistic than a lot of my other peers. So that's why, I'm always going to call it like I see it. And what you shouldn't really do is, you shouldn't dismiss what I'm saying. Right? That's a good point too. You shouldn't, if someone tells you what you don't want to hear, you shouldn't dismiss it. You should try to see, what they're looking at. What are they talking about? Okay, this guy's saying it's massively overvalued and we can continue to sell off, 20, 30% in value. Like, is that a possibility? Are we trending downward? How do the earnings look? How are the fundamentals looking on paper? How's the company's balance sheet? Has the debt been increasing? Like, that's what I mean. That's why you have to take all these things into account. And again, God bless, places like Wall Street Bets, because I'm sure they made a bunch of people a lot of money. So I appreciate the fact now that we have these like communities popping up and people are strategizing and everyone's trying to make some money in the market. Fantastic. Fantastic. But again, you can't be lazy with it. And something like, oh, let me just go on here and, oh, what are they saying? Oh, they like plug at 12? All right, whatever, I'm buying it. I'm buying it. These guys are usually right. I'm buying it. No. This is your money. You worked hard for it. You should double check and even triple check and make sure you're buying into a situation that can actually pan out and work out for you. Because the more of a dice roll it is, the more often you'll be incorrect and end up losing money over time. And that's why I always say, work smarter, not harder. But, I went on for a while. I didn't want to make this video this long, but so my apologies for that. But if anyone stuck around till this point, I really appreciate it. But I'll end it there. Once again, Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually very quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. Subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. I'll do updates. And if I have any short-term call-outs, I'll try to mention them in the Discord. Kind of been doing crappy with the index calls lately because I still feel that we should be pulling back and not really pumping up. However, I know people are hyped. We were technically selling off for a couple of months. So that's why if we want to have a couple of up weeks before potentially continuing the sell-off going into the new year, I guess that's understandable. But in my opinion, I just want everyone to, stay sharp and stay focused And remember that the environment of the market can change on a dime from day to day, hour to hour. So stay on top of any financial news you can. Pay attention to all of this economic data coming out. And, we just have to plan accordingly. And hopefully, as long as we're right more than we're wrong, everyone will be okay. So, moving forward, like I always say, I want to wish everyone success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you guys for stopping by, and I hope you enjoy your weekend.